Next week, WPMD welcomes the new members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in a big way. Sunday morning, starting at 9 Pacific, we present a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame mini music festival. 5 hours of never-aired concerts from Cheap Trick, Chicago, Deep Purple, and the Steve Miller Band. Then, on Monday night at midnight, we begin a special week of album breaks, featuring albums from new inductees. On Monday, it's Steve Miller and Circle of Love. On Tuesday, it's Chicago and Chicago 3. Wednesday, it's Deep Purple and Slaves and Masters. And we close things out on Thursday with the latest LP from Cheap Trick, Bang, Zoom, Crazy, Hello. All part of our special week honoring the new inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's happening only on WPMD on the net, where people make a difference.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Falcon Spotlight. I'm your host, Rob Flores, here at Cerritos College, Norwalk, California, and at this time, I'd like my guest to please introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Assembly Woman Cristina Garcia, representing the 58th District, the cities of Bell Gardens, Commerce, Montebello, Pico Rivera, Cerritos, Artesia, Bellflower, Downey, and Norwalk, including Cerritos College. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Now, tell me, for those that aren't aware, what exactly is the Assembly?
I'm your state representative in the legislature. We have two houses, the Assembly and the Senate. So I'm part of what we call the People's House, and so I represent 500,000 constituents here in Southern California. The legislature with the governor make the laws for the state.
Excellent. And how was the selection process?
So I run for office. I'm an elected official. I run every 2 years. My first election was in 2012, and I had the privilege to have the voters vote me into office, and I'm wrapping up my second term and up for re-election now for my third term.
And the office is how long?
Every 2 years, for a total of term limits of 12 years, and so if the voters want me here, I'll get to serve for another 8 years.
Cool. And I like to always get, my audience to hear the story of my guest, starting with, K-12. Were you involved in anything? Did you have a particular interest during K-12? Were you like in music or a sport or something?
Sure. So I grew up in the city of Bell Gardens, and I went to public schools in Bell Gardens. And I think like most of our listeners out there today, my parents worked almost all 7 days of the week. They would go to work at 5:30 in the morning, come back at 6 p.m. But they would always tell us to go to school and ask for help, that was going to be our way to be better and move on up. So I love school. I love math since I was little, and I've kind of been a math nerd all my life. I did the Math Olympics, the Science Olympics. I did math camps. I was lucky that a lot of times teachers would encourage me to apply for things, and I would, and I would get to participate in great programs along the way. And so I spent a lot of my time in the library. In high school, I joined every club you could think of. I was in, all the cool clubs, right? The French club, the math leads. I was the editor of the school newspaper. I helped start a youth group to do more civic engagement and learn about our public elected officials. We started an environmental club. So pretty busy with that. But most of my time in high school was being a good student and just kind of delving into the world of math. Excellent.
And after high school, did you know what path you wanted to take? Did you know right away what college you wanted to go to, what major?
I was lucky, and I applied to a lot of great schools, and I ended up going to Pomona College. It's a little liberal arts college in Claremont, one of the best in the nation that very few people knew about. When I applied, everyone wasn't sure why I was going there versus, say, UCLA or USC, what we all think about in the area. But I got lucky when I got there. The school really encouraged you to study what you wanted to study. And so I became a math major early on, and that stayed my major the whole time. But I never knew what I was going to do when I grew up. I was just going to study math because it's what I loved, and I found it so interesting. And when I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do. And at that point, there was a huge shortage of teachers, especially math teachers. So I applied to be a math teacher with LA Unified, and I got hired in a day. And so I went from being a student to being a math teacher all of a sudden. I had no experience as a math teacher, and I will say my first year, I was a pretty bad math teacher. I didn't know how to hold discipline. I didn't know how to relate to my students because math had always come easy to me. And so I really struggled my first year. But I asked for help. The dean helped me out to figure out discipline, and I enrolled in a credential program. And after that, things got better, and I taught math for 13 years. But I didn't know. I just kind of even now, opportunities come before me, and I think it's having the courage to take advantage of them and try something new.
Excellent. And what was your motivation, the inspiration for your the majors and degrees you chose?
I really don't know. Since I was a little kid, I've always loved numbers and patterns. And only one time in my life that I tried to, do something different. And I was in 5th grade. I was going to be starting at a new intermediate school, and I thought, okay, I could be the cool kid now, and I'm going to really try something different. And it lasted for all of one day, because then my 2 friends that I had weren't talking to me, and all the other kids still weren't talking to me. And so I just always just kind of was like, let me do what I like to do and what I'm good at, and that was numbers and math and patterns. And I think having parents who told me just to do something and be good at school and was really helpful. But I got lucky that I figured out early on that I like math, even though I never knew what I was going to do with it.
I know most people, they're intimidated by math, the numbers and everything.
And it breaks my heart because I love math, and I think as I've taught it now longer and I've seen students struggle, my favorite part of teaching math is when I see the students get over that anxiety and that fear and think, okay, I could do this, I could manage this, even if I don't love it, I could get through a math class, or I could get through these math problems. And I think what's happened is we teach it here in America with the right math is what's going to take the least amount of space on a sheet of paper, and that's not the right math. The right math is getting to the right answer. However you get there is fine, and it's really flexible, and there's lots of different ways to get there, and it's about building blocks and what do you know and how do you build from there moving forward. But that's not how we've taught it in America, and so it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people think that math isn't for everyone, especially now given so much of our future jobs require some basic number sense. So I do think we need to rethink basic number sense by age 9. I think we need to allow students to know that there's different ways to do that. I think we need to do things like including art, reading, music, the things that people love, and integrating that into our math classrooms so that the students have something to look forward to. But it took me many years to figure that out, and the reality is that the way we teach math only serves and helps a couple of people. The majority of students struggle with it because we don't allow them to have that flexibility.
And so a lot of people, if they've never been to like a governing type of meeting, and they hear like all like the technical language and stuff like yays and nays and the Brown Act, Robert's Rules of Order, and all that type of stuff. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? We have a responsibility to be civically engaged, but learning how to do it takes time. And for a lot of us, we come from households where our parents are working all the time. Maybe they didn't have a lot of experience with government, or their experiences have been really bad. And so that home, like intergenerational teachings are not always there, and it's no one's fault. And so how do we learn? And so part of it is walking in and starting to listen and then ask questions. So yes, why don't we just say yes or no? Or do you agree with this, yes or no? But instead we say, what's your vote? Aye. Or nay, no, I don't agree with it, right? Robert's Rules of Order, just basic, really it's about like, can we have some basic decorum, basic ways to guarantee that we move business forward and we're not just stuck in the tit for tat and fighting with each other. If someone says, I called the question, all they're really saying is, let's vote on this. Enough talking already. Why are we wasting time? And so it definitely takes time. It's taken me, a lot of years to figure it out. And there's still a lot that I don't know. I often go up to our clerk, who's in charge of making sure we're following these Robert's Rules of Orders and everything else. But most of it's to make sure that we're moving in an orderly fashion. And most of it is language we don't use anymore. So in the same way that a lot of us speak Spanish at home and English, and we mix it up and we do the Spanglish, well, the same thing, I feel like, following the language in government is like it's their language. But with a little bit of time, you could follow enough and figure it out.
Excellent. We'll be right back after this quick break.
The people who climb to rock's highest peaks have a body of work with the greatest breadth. And we bring it all to you on collections. The biggest hits, best known album tracks, live and broadcast performances, collaborations, demos, alternate mixes and takes, even unreleased music.
Stop playing.
What do the Dave Clark Five, Frankie Lane, and Sammy Hagar, the Jarmels, Kelly Clarkson, and Buck Owens have in common? You'll hear music from all of them in the WPNB Oldies Jukebox. From the biggest names in music to one-hit wonders, from hard rock to easy listening, from R&B to C&W, from the early 50s to almost today. It's a musical mosaic that you won't find anywhere on your radio, your satellite receiver, or anywhere else on the net. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of titles in our jukebox, all of them there, because of our one and only rule. If you heard it on the radio, you'll hear it on the WPNB Oldies Jukebox. Weekends on WPNB
well, my
on the net,
advisor,
where
he
people
takes care of
make a
everything. But I have to read this thing right here. Being a responsible citizen, you want to know what's going on in your community. And being a responsible community radio station, it's our job to let you know. So, WPMD presents the meetings of both the Norwalk and Cerritos City Council meetings every Sunday at 5 Pacific, only on WPMD on the net, where people make a difference. Yeah, so each individual student, like, they have the responsibility of, like, their own show, like, recording their own show and stuff as it's being broadcast live. And then, most of us, we try to have a fan page that we create, maybe on Facebook or our own independent shows. So one of the things I incorporated with mine is that since I don't play music, I don't have to worry about copyright and stuff, so I can record video and upload it onto YouTube. And then with that, I can track my own views. I have over 7,000 minutes of views.
Wow.
So it's getting there upper.
They take care of our housing. They take care of our food.
So how do you decide what you want to cover or who you're going to have on the show?
I try to reach out every time. I'll call different cities and call their city hall. I'll just let them know, let every council member know. They can look me up on YouTube and they'll see leaders I've interviewed before. And welcome back to the Falcon Spotlight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Rob Flores, here at Cerritos College at WPMD Studios, where people make a difference. Now, remember, folks, you can also email me at robert06flores@gmail.com. And Falcon Spotlight is available on Facebook. You just look up Cerritos College Falcon Spotlight, like the fan page, or you can also look for Cerritos College Falcon Spotlight on YouTube as well, as you can look at all the past video interviews as well. Tell me, when it comes to, being involved and stuff, for someone who's never been to, like, any type of meeting at all, why should people go to, like, those type of meetings, like city council and all those other ones?
Well, I think a lot of times people are frustrated. They feel that their cities or their counties or their state or the federal government are not pushing for the items that are important to them. They're not being represented. And so the first step is making yourself aware. At the end of the day, you really are our bosses. You vote, and so that gives us an office, but you're also a taxpayer, and that pays for everything that we do, or we want all the services that we want to provide. And so I think remembering that you have that power, but if you're not talking to us, we're not gonna be able to advocate for that. And remember, we're human beings, right? So we have limitations. So I spent the first part of this interview talking about my love of math. And if you leave me alone, I'm going to think about math and talk about math all the time. So I need those stories and those ideas that I spent all my life in the classroom. So if I'm going to represent 500,000 constituents plus the other 39 million in California, because I'm making decisions that affect all of us, I need to be hearing stories to give me a broader and wider perspective. And hold us accountable. I think some elected officials like myself really welcome it, and some of them are really afraid of it because we might figure out they're doing the wrong things and vote them out of office and hold them accountable along the way. I don't know if anyone remembers the scandal in the city of Bell. The city manager was earning $1.5 million and taking half of the year off. The council members were earning $100,000 for a job that's normally $8,000 a year. They stole over $150 million in bond money that the taxpayers are still paying off with nothing to show for it. And so it was because no one was following what's going on. And yes, we're busy. But even if you're not at a council meeting, can you watch it online? Can you pick up the phone? Can you look at meetings? Can you send someone else, send your kid, I don't know, I mean, to ask these questions and figure out what's going on? And it's hard. Some of these individuals will hide stuff and make it really hard for you. There were lots of people in Bell who were trying to get informed and get active, and they kept getting turned down for stuff, and they didn't have the monies to sue or anything like that, right? But I think it was those individuals, as few as there were, that kept pushing, that eventually got the LA Times to come in and write a story about it. And those same individuals are now trying to take their city back and fix it. It's going to take a long time. And so I think that's part of making sure we have a better government. And you'd be surprised. I know it feels like sometimes you don't listen, but you send me a message on Facebook, I think, and we responded pretty quickly, and we're here now. So I think the first step is trying, and you'll be pleasantly surprised how many of us do want to interact with our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about, social media is that actually, now it's given an extra opportunity for, like, elected officials to, and anybody to, like, stay connected around the whole world.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I think definitely I could share information. I think social media is great, but sometimes it's hard because there's a lot of things on social media that are anonymous and we start to think are true, and a lot of cyberbullying that goes on, and just a lot of noise to distract from the real work that's being done. And so it's how do we take it and have it be a positive tool, and not have the negatives distract us as much, And it doesn't mean you can't criticize, including on social media, but it's making sure that it's responsible and it's not just, unfounded attacks just because someone doesn't like you or it's personal or which happens a lot, or a lot of students who are cyberbullied. I passed legislation that allows schools to intervene now in cyberbullying. We couldn't do it before. You've had a lot of young kids who commit suicide because they're being cyberbullied and told to kill themselves. And schools couldn't do anything, and when they have tried, they would get sued because they didn't have the authority. A lot of times, instead of protecting the victim or protecting the perpetrators out there, they're the ones with the resources. And so I think I love social media. I use it often, but how do we start to create a community consciousness? We say things on social media that we wouldn't say to each other in person. So how do we create that consciousness on this platform that gives us so many opportunities to have a wider connection?
And tell me about your start in politics. What was, like, the first positions leading up to where you are today?
So I have a really, I don't have a normal story. I grew up in the city of Bell Gardens, and I think, unfortunately, and it's something that I work to change now, growing up in cities like Bell Gardens, Linwood maybe, success is seen as leaving and never coming back. It's like I left for college and I was never going to come back, and I would come back sometimes because my mom was going to cook something that I really like, or I needed $20, I needed to do laundry, right? I would come back for things like that, and I would see her on Sundays. If I felt guilty, I'd go to church with her. But that was kind of it, and I fit into that stereotype for 15 years, I want to say. And my parents got sick, and my siblings looked at me and said, well, you're just a teacher and single, so move back home to take care of them. And I didn't think about it. It was just they took care of me for 30 years. I'm going to come home and take care of them. And I thought it was temporary. But they were really sick, and the doctors made it clear that I was going to have to be there longer. And so I stayed, begrudgingly. I stayed. And I would always complain, and my sister one day told me, you're a leader, this community invested in you, start to invest in the community, give back. And I started going to council meetings. I didn't like what I saw. I started asking questions, and I was kind of like, we have a casino with a lot of money, a lot more than most of my neighboring cities. Why are we not better off? Started asking questions about what was going on with our money. What are you spending our money on? Why is it more expensive to go to the public pool? It used to be free when I was a kid, and we didn't have a casino back then. And that led some constituents on Bell to reach out to me and say, can you help us get information about why our taxes are so high? And I did. I was a good researcher. At that point, I was teaching at USC. So it's like I could research, and during that process, the LA Times broke the story. And I just felt a sense of responsibility that I had to step up and do something. That was like the scandal was so big that it was going to be what was going to help change the culture in the Southeast, not just in the city of Bell. So I had never done anything like that. But my friend and I started Basta, and for months we fought for change, and we continue to fight now in different ways to make that city better. But we did. Everyone was convicted. A number of these individuals are in jail. We got some of our monies back. The taxpayers got some monies back. We have one of the more transparent governments now in the area. There's a lot more work to do, but it was just a sense of responsibility and stepping up to the plate. And I think that's like our parents, right? They show up here, they're immigrants, they don't know the system, but they have a sense of responsibility to their kids to figure it out and be successful for them, or successful enough so that we have it better. I think it was the same thing for us. It was like, this is for the next generation to make sure we have it better. This is our opportunity. So we got lucky in some respects, but we worked really hard, and a lot of people with experience did help us along the way. We asked for help constantly. And so I thought I was done. I didn't want to do anything else in the public eye. But that same community group that had been working with me asked me to run for assembly. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I was tired. When you're a public figure, people attack you for everything, for having a bad hair day, for having an accent, for if you're doing this, you must want something in exchange, or you're going to be the next person stealing our money. You're volunteering all this free time, and all of a sudden you're the bottom of the barrel. So I was like, I'm done. But I looked around and I thought, well, I've been talking about representing ourselves. I've been talking about being underrepresented in the state legislature and saying that we can do better. Just give us an opportunity, and help invest in us. And I looked around and I was like, well, if not me, and if not now, then who? And so that community group and we launched a campaign and beat all the odds. No one endorsed me. One of my candidates spent $1.7 million. And the last 3 weeks was hitting me in the mail nonstop with negative stuff. My mom was like, I don't want to check the mail anymore because I'm starting to believe this stuff is true, even though I know it's not. Another candidate spent about $1 million and also was hitting me in the mail nonstop. And so it's hard. Your parents, your family, your friends are reading this stuff and they're like, is this true? And it's like, it's not, but we beat them. We didn't have the money that way, but we had hundreds of volunteers, and they would hand deliver my mail when we didn't have money. And they believed, and they're the same group that continues to work with me now to try to work within the system, but at the same time make sure we're changing it and making it better and giving more access to the constituents. At the end of the day, this job's going to be gone, and I'm okay with that whenever that happens, whether I don't get reelected or I term out. And I hope my legacy is the community members that are going to be better equipped to keep us accountable, to demand stuff, to help set the agenda, to make sure we're not a second-class citizen, to make sure when we have things like Exide and we're being polluted for 30 years, that never happens again, and that they hold the state accountable for letting that happen, and that quick response we saw in Porter Ranch or Aliso Canyon, that we have the same type of quick response in our communities, which we haven't had traditionally. We have 2 Californias. And so part of my goal is to make sure that changes, that we are empowered in a way to make sure that we are just as important as these communities that have more income.
Yeah, and that's another question I usually ask my guests is, what do they want to be remembered as? What their legacy? If somebody had met them just once, what would you hope they got out of it that they remembered most about you?
Well, I hope if someone sees me just once that it turns into a longer relationship. I think if they just meet me once and that's the only thing we do, I feel like a failure. I think for me, my legacy is those relationships where I can navigate the process with individuals so they learn better, so that they join the commissions like you've joined, so that they're going to those council meetings, so that they're running for council, so that they're starting nonprofits, so that they're challenging us and running for assembly and senate and taking those seats one day. I hope that that's my legacy, that at the end, all of these programs we're starting can stand alone, and it's irrespective of who your assembly member or your senator is. It's a matter of the community is doing this and demanding it and getting things done. And so I hope that my legacy are those individuals that we have relationships with, and we talk about engaging them first and foremost, right? That first interaction is the first step of many. Empowering them, educating them so that they know the process, and then empowering them so that they start to implement the type of programs they want in their community.
And, from our audience that aren't aware of what commissions are, can you explain?
So, we're human beings as city council members, right? We have limited experience in it. And so we have commissions that are groups of community members to help inform us and do the homework on certain areas. So we have it on parks and recreations. We have it on arts, on even things like traffic, citations, planning, how economic development in our communities. There's lots of different these subcommittees that we create to help to gather information and then help inform decisions and votes that we're going to be taking. And so they're an arm of our decision making. We have it at different levels. At the assembly, we don't have commissions that are formal like this, but a lot of us will create cabinets, which are the same thing. These are groups of individuals who come together to talk to us about issues that matter. So I'm going to be hosting an education roundtable with my education cabinet in the near future. My cabinet's pretty big for education. It's 2 pieces. We have board members and superintendents that come together regularly, and then I have a second piece where I have teachers come together regularly to help, inform my decision and tell me what I should be pushing for in the budget in the state.
Oh, pretty cool. So just as like let's see, because this is all new to me as well, like being like a commissioner and stuff. But I know like when I got appointed, they had me go to some kind of training session, ethics training and stuff like that. So as you rise up to like each position and stuff, like for your position, like do you have to attend like some kind of a conference, or what kind of training sessions do they give you when you get elected?
So here's the deal. If you're a U.S. citizen, you can become an elected official, right? It's convincing enough of the voters, 50% plus 1, that you are the best person equipped to do the job. Doesn't mean that you know everything yet. You're going to have to figure it out, but you're making a promise to the voters that you're going to do your homework and figure it out. So that's the first step. After that, actually, there's not a lot of training. You have to seek it out, that leadership training. You have to seek out that advice. We do have mandates and laws, like we need to take 3 hours of ethics training. We need to take 3 hours of sexual harassment training. We need to take training on making sure that we're not being abusive employers, right? I have staff that works for me. So there's a lot of training that we take. It's about 6 or 7 different trainings. In total, about 20 hours. But after that, you're on your own. So it's up to you to figure out what conference can I go to, what group can I join, what cabinets or subcommittees can I create to help inform my decision making, and who am I going to ask for help on this stuff on a regular basis. And so it's a little scary because we're human beings, right? We're going to screw it up sometimes. Part of what I talk to folks is, how do we humanize my job? I'm not a god. I'm a regular person that has decided I'm going to do a lot of extra homework to try to be better. And if I screw it up, how is the public going to tell me I screwed up, but then help me fix it, right? Instead of just throw more stones at me. But I'm at the state level. This is the reality of how all local elected officials work. We have no special training. We're just like you. And so we have to go out of our way to find that help.
And I'm also a block watch captain, so one of the things they encouraged us to do is go to cert training. It was pretty interesting because I hadn't been in something like that, but it was pretty interesting. The type of training and the importance of being prepared for in the event of like a disaster and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of responsibility, right? You if there's a disaster, you turn to the mayor or to your state electeds or whoever is there, and we talk about in these crises, look for the heroes. So a lot of times the heroes are the people like yourself who are out there doing these block watch, volunteer hours and so forth. And so these heroes are just you and I. It's our neighbors, right? It's us. And so we have to do some training like that also. I had to do it as a teacher also. But I just had my district director ask me, have you sat down with the person in charge of emergency response in this area? And I was like, wow, this is my 4th year and I haven't. But let's hurry up and do it, because there's going to be an emergency and people are going to turn to me and I have to be ready to take action. And so it's just interesting, all the things that people expect us to learn. And I have a team. I'm lucky. I have a big team that helps to make sure that we're thinking ahead and we're preparing for these emergencies and for everything else. But it's taken 4 years to get me here, and so it's the reality of sometimes so many things are pulling at you, what you react to. But if you're doing it, right, that means I'm doing it. We both grew up in similar communities, like the students that are here. It takes time. You could be out doing other fun things, right, but instead you're doing your community work. But I think in doing that, you're invested in a community that's invested in you to make sure that you don't fall through the cracks and that we have more opportunities for the next generation. And just like our parents struggled so much and sacrificed so much for us, I think we have a responsibility to sacrifice for the next set of our future, your little brother, whoever that might be, your nephew, your nieces, so that they have it better.
And in addition to a block watch and being a commissioner, I'm also part of my city's Parks Recreation Advisory. So little by little, I'm learning, some stuff. And another cool thing that we had a meeting, I guess, where I guess the county was asking for like the needs of all the cities in general to see, what can be improved. So, how does it work necessarily? Like, do the mayors like meet with like the assembly? Do you guys see like the governor and stuff? Like, how does it all tie together? Like the web.
So at the state legislature, we have the governor, who's the executive branch. We have the legislature, the assembly, and the senate. And the governor, sometimes we meet with him. I had dinner with him recently, and it wasn't just me. It was about 25 of us. And he walked around and sat at the different tables for a little bit. So he came to our table, and he always writes you a little note at your chair when we have these dinners. Once a year, we get together with him. And for 3 years, he's messed up my name. There's no H in Cristina in my name. And so I pulled out my pink pen, because I'm still a teacher at heart. I was like, hey, can you correct this, because you misspelled it again? And I always joke with people that the first one's free, and then I start charging you for the extra H's. And so I'm doing this, and my peers are listening to me, and I'm putting the governor on check, right? This guy has a ton of love, a ton of power. He gets to veto my bills if he wants to on a regular basis. And he's like, Christ didn't have an H in his name. And I was like, oh, but Christ had an H in his name. He said, and I was like, oh, I'm like, Cristo didn't have an H in his name? And so he looked at me and he's like, I can't believe you just told me that. And I was like, here, correct it. Don't do it again. Next time I'm going to really charge you for this mistake. So we get to interact with him here and there, not enough. And sometimes it's short moments like that. That was all my time was revolved around my name in this H. But I think now he'll know who I am. So when I make a call to say this law is really important or this issue is really important to my district, hopefully he'll pay a little more attention. In the same way that now that you are more and more involved, when you talk to your council members, I'm sure they're like, oh, this is an important issue because this person is now a leader in the community. You show up at one thing, people figure it out, and they expect more of you, right? Where they drag you into more activities. And that's also why we need more people to get involved, because there's only so much you could do. So we need to spread those responsibilities around. But people start to listen. So we've been fighting about Excite for a really long time. We were getting nowhere. We couldn't get the state to get engaged. I went on the record and I said that the governor's proposal in the budget, which was to only give us $8 million when we need $500 million, was insulting. And it was like he was throwing pennies at brown people. And so I finally got his attention. So he called us in to have a meeting. And now we have $176 million that were just officially appropriated and are on their way as of last week to the community to help speed up and make sure that cleanup gets done. And it's not all the money we need. But we do have different ways to interact with the governor and affect the way he makes decisions. Sometimes it's through nice dinners, and sometimes it's through calling him out in the newspapers. But there's a lot of power that assembly members and senators have. But more reason why the public has a responsibility to keep us on check, because it's really easy to abuse our power. It's really easy to forget we're human beings and we start to think that we're gods and that we know everything. So a lot of people tell us like, yes, you're